nothing new.
You know, I feel so bad. She's still looking for stuff. She's been over there working in that garage.
Lower trash. Lower back. Well, you're all in.
Okay, can everybody hear? All right. Well, welcome to the summer series of the 6th annual Tony Wyack History Festival, and it's sponsored by the Washburn Area Historical Society and the Washburn Heritage Association. And this series has been made possible by a grant from the Apostle Islands Historic Preservation Conservancy. And now the music this evening is provided by Yasmin and Bruce Bowers and is sponsored by Petra Holter. And after the presentation, we invite you to stay after the presentation for more music and refreshments. So, and we'll also have a break, an intermission, so you can give you guys a chance to get some food and drink. Technical assistance tonight is provided by Lucy Evans and Amber Grimm, who's on the camera. And also thank you to the Harborview for hosting this series. We hope you can join us next week on August 8th for Betty Ferris's presentation, If Walls Could Speak, and that's tracing the history of what we know as the broke down palace building. Now, before we go on, we'll now have just a quick word from Ann Christensen, and this is about the art display that we have here tonight in the back of the room. So Ann,
hello. I think I know everybody here. But my name is Ann Christensen, and as you enter, you see there's a display of pictures of the walking trail. I'm in a small pastel group that has been meeting in Washburn for, I don't know how many years, I want to say like 7. We started with Doug Thomas, many of you will remember Doug, who had an artist studio where the Snug is right now. His dream was to have an artist's school in Washburn. And when he died of cancer, we tried to keep the school going without him. And that didn't work out. But Carolyn Holman, in her generous spirit, opened her studio to us. So on Tuesday nights for the past 6 or 7 years, we've been painting there as a group. And you'll see examples of our work back there. What's fun for me to see is everybody's different perspectives on the walking trail and the different styles. We're all painting with pastels. I think there's one oil there. But the rest are pastels, and they're all for sale, and the artist's information is on the picture. So if you're interested in purchasing any of them, they are available, and you can talk to me about that too. So, and thank you to the Historical Society for allowing us to include these as part of this sort of general night of love for the walking trail. So, thank you.
thank you, Ann. Well, we're fortunate tonight to have Dora Kling, one of the Washburn's premier historians. And Dora is originally from Columbia, Missouri, and like she pronounced it, Missouri. Yeah. So in the 1980s, she came to Ashland to begin the Anna Marie Designs, which designed and sold maternity clothes. And later her company expanded into skiing and sporting apparel. And during those years, she lived in both Ashland and Bayfield, and she'll elaborate more on that later in her talk. In 1987, she retired from her company and moved to Washburn. For the next 5 years, she became the first cultural director for the Washburn Cultural Society and the museum under Skip Ungrod. We were combined at that time. We're not combined now. We're two separate units. She has also restored many homes in Washburn, and now lives in a restored 1894 home, which could have once been described as one of Washburn's most run-down buildings and in town, and now it's a really magnificent showplace. She has been on the City of Washburn's Historic Preservation Commission since its inception, a board member of the Washburn Heritage Association, and a member of the Washburn Area Historical Society. And she has been involved in the establishment and protection of our beloved walking trail since its beginning. So now please welcome Dora as our speaker here tonight.
Thank you, David. Okay, this is a night that we can enjoy looking out the window and actually seeing the walking path. And I too want to do a few introductions here. The one particularly that I want to introduce is Andrew Grimm. He's the other half of tonight's presentation. He's done all the graphics, taken the pictures along the walking path, and I particularly want to have you get acquainted with Andrew. He lives in Ashland with his wife, Jackie, but he works in Washburn as a teacher at the high school. I asked Andrew if he had any children, and he said no. Then he said, but I will in January. Anyway, that's exciting. And so please introduce yourselves to him when you have time. And also thanks to Lynn that does a lot of the work here, and to all the workers of the Heritage Association. And also to the Historical Society. We're two of us here. And finally, no introductions needed to here for Bruce and Jasmine again, but I just want to say thanks that the great music they bring to tonight too. So David was right now in this introduction. He said about me. I was born in Columbia, Missouri, and after going to Christian college, finishing school for young women, and I never got finished. I got married and moved to Brookfield, Missouri, and then on to Kansas City. And a big move then was to Minneapolis, and that by then with 3 children. I went back to school to get the art degree, and that I didn't get finished. But it did get me a great job with Munsingwear as a clothing designer. I had this boys wear men's golf shirts, the penguin on the pocket golf shirts, and I had with Ashland, it was here, and it was one of our plants, one of the largest sewing plants for our shirts, and I would visit it regularly. Each time I'd come up here, I kept liking this area more and more, and so when Munsingwear moved south and closed all their sewing plants, and also in Minneapolis, we were all out of work until I started my own company called Anne Marie Designs and brought it to Ashland for it to be produced. And I knew the women here, they left the thread was on the sewing machines. It's like you leave a place and you think, oh, well, I'll be back, you know, we'll be working again. That didn't happen, but we brought our company, we brought our, and it was maternity, where in the 80s, women wanted to look good and they wanted to keep those jobs they had. And so it worked perfectly. They'd never used knits. It was always the duck-like with a big bow stuff, and women didn't want that anymore. So our line was well received, sold it all over the United States. And and the name of it came from a friend of mine that had a baby, and it was named Anna Marie. So that was the reason. And it seemed a little different in Ashland when we would be sewing sometimes ski wear, and we were sewing all these different things. And we kept reinventing ourselves because when Polar Fleece fabric came out, we were the first ones. We made the jackets and things. And we did all of Cabela's, not all of it, but some of their jackets and things for camouflage. So it was a great company. And but I was glad to retire. So anyway, but coming up here, it meant another move. My mother kept saying, are you still going farther north? And I'd say yes. And I bought a house in Washburn in 1987, and it was on Hillside Drive. Loved the house, loved living here. And after about 10 years in my business, I retired. My mother said, now I hope you're coming home. And I said, Mother, I am home. And I've stayed here now for 30 years. My son Kevin came up to visit when I'd been here in my house about 8 months in Washburn. And he said, I'm going to take a walk down to downtown, see what's there. And he was gone a couple of hours, and when he got back, he was real excited because he said, I found they've got a walking path down here. And I said, well, I didn't know it. I said, well, how did you find that out? And he said, well, first he found Patsy's Bar. And they know everything. So that's how I found Washburn Lakeshore Parkway and Walking Trail. And I became a friend of the walking trail ever since. And tonight then, I'm gonna tell some stories about the walking trail. And this story begins on the shores of the bay called Shagawamagon, where the first human footsteps have been felt there on these paths for over 100 years. But the first actual history of human habitation in Washburn began with the European and American settlers in the 1980s. In 1982, John A. Jacobs, who would later build a single mill on the shores of the present-day Washburn Walking Trail, where we're sitting right now. He was an engineer on the steamer Eva Wadsworth. And that summer, he and Captain Hank Thompson brought a delegation of prominent men to the shore for the purpose of surveying and platting the town site. That town site became Washburn. This area had a natural deep harbor, acres of prime timber that made Washburn the perfect milling and shipping town. Present-day population here now is like over 2,000. Well, back then it swelled over 10,000. Hines, Bigelow, Jacobs, Sprague, and Thompson. They're just a few of the many lumber companies who dotted the shoreline and employed thousands of workers over the span of 50 years. Serious settlements began in about 1884, after the opening of the Chicago-St. Paul, Minneapolis-Omaha Railroad, 1883. And this is what was so surprising to me. It was just 82 when John Jacobs was here, and by 83 we had a railroad. That meant they had that railroad built in about a year, and by having a railroad, this was fantastic because there were no cars. There's no way anybody got around but a horse, buggy, boat. So anyway, having the train, that meant they could bring a lot of workers, and they need laborers now for a big industry happening here. So then the trains went from here to Minneapolis, and then from Minneapolis they could go to Chicago or they could go to Omaha. And this is the only way anything got shipped or sent anyplace. And so Omaha would be bringing in all the grain, Chicago, all kinds of things were shipped to come up, and they could go on either being shipped out of here. The Omaha, this was something that surprised me too, but the Omaha alone, they're the only ones now that they built a large coal dock, merchandising dock, and a 900,000 bushel elevator dock on Washburn's lakefront. The coal dock was built in 1883, the merchant dock built in 1884, and the grain elevator and dock built in 1886. And I just heard the weather a few nights ago, and they were talking about highest temperature recorded here on this date, 1886, when it reached 91 degrees. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, and they were building the grain elevator. So the grain elevator stored grain shipped to Washburn Crosby Company from Minneapolis here. Well, later that was called General Mills. And the story was that when General Mills first shipped bleached flour up to our Washburn, shipped it to Washburn, someone said, that flour deserves a gold medal. So they named it gold medal flour. And the coal dock is at the same site today as it was in the 1885. Merchandise commercial dock was used for transporting packaged goods to and from Washburn. And also a lot of the houses then that were shipped in by the catalog, that's where they would come. They would come to the dock to be picked up. There's the photographs, I think, that Andrew is showing of the grain elevator in 1888. And that was the largest grain elevator on the Great Lakes, 6 stories high. Another photograph taken around the 1885 is from the top of the grain elevator. Now this is about the first photograph taken. And if you notice all the stumps in the foreground, where big trees have been cut, Aldo Leopold said, a trump is a sign of progress. Well, Washburn was certainly progressing. From this picture in 1886 of the waterfront showing the Omaha Industries, tall building to your left is the grain elevator, long building in the center and the coal docks, and the right is the warehouse. Sawmills are present like dots in a row. And all these sawmills, my concept was, you know, you'd have one sawmill till it was gone, another would replace it and so forth. That's not the way it was. When you see these pictures, these sawmills are all right next to each other, and yet they all have their own logs. They all have this going day and night. And so it's a busy time. So the Thompson Mill is directly below 10th Avenue. So follow 10th Avenue down, and we have, it's right to Thompson's West End Park. 6th Avenue is where the walking trail starts, and it's hard to see on there, but you can follow that. From the 1880s to 1920, lumber mills, railroads, shipping activity begins. All the old pines are cut down. Pathways formed by workers to get to the docks, the boats, the mills, the railroads. One of the most popular paths went to the old city dock, follow Washington Avenue and extended to the lake, where the boat, the skater, rules the waves on Chequamegon Bay. The skater made daily trips to and from Washburn, Madeline Island, and Bayfield. But the Mary Scott, a steamboat ferry, went to Ashland every morning and back at 4 in the afternoon. The city dock was a popular place to just hang out, see who's coming to Washburn. On Sunday evenings, 1896, couples and their families, all dressed up, would walk down to the dock to watch the Mary Scott come in at 8 o'clock. This was the regular outing and the parade. When the sawmills got along, sides were slabs, tossed away to be picked up, used by anyone that needed them for house or to make your path better. It was said that there was once a footpath connecting Slab Town to the sawmills, the train depot, or the coal docks half-mile away. So I want you to take a minute now and imagine you are down by the lake. First you have to cross the railroad track to get there, and the train whistles, there's a blast. It's very loud with the sounds of all the sawmills running day and night. Boats are loading, whistles are blowing, logs are being pulled out of the water. Workers everywhere moving fast. It's too noisy to stay there. The people built their houses as far away as they could to get away from this environment. My house is an 1894 house, built as far away up the hill as possible. In 1887, A.C. Probart's house was built in the same neighborhood. And his house was, A.C. was a banker and built the 1890 bank in Washburn. It's now, what's in Washburn, and then it was just called the 1890 Bank of Washburn, which is now our Washburn Historical Museum Culture Center, or Washburn Culture Center. In early 1900s, the DuPont Company was extending the dynamite plant in Barksdale. With an onset of World War I, the plant expanded over 6,000 workers. Washburn became a boom town of 9,000. DuPont did a lot of building to improve the city of Washburn, but not by the trains or the sawmills. The railroad cut the town in two. Nothing was done to improve the lake area with this exception. In 1919, the DuPont workers, when they had taken out of their paycheck every month a savings that was for the war, and when the war was over, they had this money left over and wondered what they were going to do with it. And the idea came that they would buy the land and they would build a park and they would have it for all the people of Washburn, and it was in memory of the veterans. So that money was spent, that now we're all using it still for our memorial park. So from 1920 now to 1960, the lumber industry dies out. Mills fall to ruin when no more trees are left for lumber. Without the logs, the lumber industry is no more. By the 1930s, the old city dock sinks into Lake Superior. The DuPont Company leaves town not immediately, but not as aggressively as they were. Many of the paths are overgrown from lack of use. We started our story with John Jacobs platting our town. Well, he did build his mill, John A. Jacobs Enterprises, composed of the Elmore Fowler Jacobs Company and the Fowler Jacobs Company. And that was built in 1898. And he made shingles with double E blocks. Well, this mill burned in 1903, but he remained in business until 1907. By 1920, all the wood-related businesses in Washburn were gone. And I enjoyed Mr. Sprague's speech last week when he talked about Mr. Jacobs was helping in the library, and we know Mr. Thompson, and so once you start learning about these people, then those names fit where they were, what they did. But one story ends, a new one begins. Times change. In 1970s and 1980s, we have a new story to tell. We have the beginning of a new lake trail, starting at Thompson's West End Park, named after Thompson Mill that was there right on that spot until it ended in 1907. But the name stays with us at the West End Park. But the real beginning of the walking trail, as we know it today, started in 1976. A town meeting held at the Washburn High School cafeteria, chaired by Mayor Edith Mirla. Now, all of us know that if the mayor calls the town to have a meeting and it's in the cafeteria, this must be serious. And the purpose of this meeting was to figure out how to share the positive attributes of Washburn with others. Bud Robinson, music professor from Northland College and native of Washburn, suggested that a walking trail to be developed along the shoreline, a simple, quiet retreat from the noise of humanity, where one could listen to the songs of the birds and the rustling of the leaves. A far cry from its industrial beginning of the 1880s. Bob and Jan Norland had told Bud about their vacation to the East Coast, where on a tour of homes, they traveled on a small dirt path of wildflowers and asparagus, and how much the people enjoyed the path in the woods. They said that Washburn needed a path like that by the lake. Later, in recalling the meeting, this now is in 201 and July 14th, and they asked Bob Norland about it, and he wrote, well, regarding the start of the trail, the suggestion of having a Lakeshore Trail originated at that meeting held at the school. But if I remember correctly, the session was conducted by Northwest Regional Planning Commission. That session was conducted, from Spooner, they came over, and I think the Northwest Regional Planning had a contract to make a plan for Washburn. Well, then it seemed to me after the public meeting, they prepared a plan and published it in a booklet form. Among the items was a plan with a section that would have a lakefront path. So there was a proposal in it for that to go from